Let's call to order. Are we ready?
Yeah, he told everyone.
Hi, this is Tom.
Mr. Jacobs, are you there?
Yes,
Can you hear me okay?
yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, you're on speaker, Tom. So if you talk, everyone will hear.
So we do have,
Okay, great.
just so the board's aware, we do have microphones set up. So you can try to minimize the tapping and pencil dragging or banging on the, just so that, as you can see, the loud noise, so it will provide feedback on the video as well. So please try to minimize the additional distractions or noises so that we entered some mics so that people in the audience could hear better this week, as well as still trying to do the live board meeting. So Mr. Smithing, we just concluded closed session. Would it be okay if we voted on the personnel packet now?
Do we want to, I guess we did all this stuff. Do we want to do pledge allegiance again?
We can, it's up to you.
Yeah, let's do a pledge allegiance again.
Okay.
For the crowd.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we want to vote on you want to do the vote on the personnel packet and then,
I can read the resolution.
okay, let's do that.
The Board of Education, Township High School, District 208, Cook County, Illinois, approves the personnel packet as presented and discussed during the August 19, 2020 closed session meeting. Second.
Second by Ms. Zalis.
We'll have, we'll do a roll call.
Mr. Jacobs?
Yes,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We'll do a report. We'll do the president's report. I have a statement I'd like to read. I called this emergency meeting of the Board of Education for the explicit purpose of approving a revised remote learning plan and addressing the shared expectations for our RB students. The board presented a unanimous vote to return to in-person learning. However, with last week's unfortunate turn of events, the district has made the decision to begin the school year with remote learning. The community's expectations of our essential teachers are to educate our children. The RBEA union leadership is not listening to the community, and in my opinion, misrepresented its membership with its participation in this process. The community has lost faith and confidence with that posture. Hence, we have asked the administration to reconstruct the remote learning plan to properly educate our children. The current remote plan, as presented and discussed last Tuesday, is unacceptable for this community. Our ultimate goal is a positive one for supreme education and greater mental health for all of our teenagers. We have heard from so many parents and community members. The board's expectation for this plan shall include a fundamental need for the teacher's virtual instruction to resemble as closely as possible the in-person learning environment. That the curriculum will be covered with the same rigor and timeline similar to an in-person environment. Strategies should be identified by special education, ELL, and student services, counselors, school psychologists, and social workers to provide in-person support and interventions as needed throughout remote learning. Provide the greatest extent possible the extracurricular clubs, sports, and activities that are so important to the social and emotional needs of our students. Teachers should be on campus for remote learning with all their teaching tools at their disposal. Unless accommodations have been made with the district office, This will provide the best possible learning environment for our children. The administration will develop a plan and protocol for school facilities to be open on a limited basis for the following: students who need a safe, quiet space with internet access to engage in remote learning; teachers who choose to schedule meetings with individual students or small groups of students to provide academic support and interventions. Lunches will be provided for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch service. If a family has an emergency and needs to be added to the lunch program, the business office shall be flexible and work out a plan with that family. The board's commitment this evening is to address these concerns to the best of our abilities and remind all stakeholders, community members, parents, teachers, and students that we are committed to this academic partnership to provide a comprehensive education for our children. It is our goal to return to an in-person learning environment whenever possible. Thank you. I'd like to open up for visitor statements. I'm going to read the Board of Education welcomes and encourages the participation of its citizens in the business of the school district. There are 2 points in the meeting where visitor statements are scheduled. Citizens are welcome to raise questions or make comments on either one. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and cannot be combined. Please note the Board of Education will not answer questions or engage in dialogue during visitor comments. If a person would like additional time to address the board, such a request shall be submitted in writing 48 hours before the meeting to the superintendent. I don't believe we had any requests.
We did not.
All right, I think to open to comments.
Start with this section. Anybody from this section?
Come on down.
Are we going with this section first, Wes?
Oh, well, yes.
This way we'll work right to left. Yes. Are those names that?
Yeah, that might help.
Thank you, Kylie.
Brian Conroy? I have no comment. Okay. Lynn Nelson? Okay, Maria Kaplan? Gina DeBroth? Not this time. Jen Ortega?
Jen Oltragi.
Oktragi, I'm sorry, Jen.
Not at this time.
Kristen Hoyt? Patty Sherback? Emerald? Did I say that right?
Yes.
You want to come down?
I'm talking, you can come say something.
And then Tida and Seneca Lester? Okay, come on down.
Sure.
No.
Just by the microphone, one of the microphones, please.
Thank you. Okay, well, I usually don't do public speaking. It's not my forte, so please bear with me. And I'm very nervous, so
So
please bear with me
you have
even
3
more.
minutes, and with 30 seconds left,
I
I'll put
will
my hand up.
do this quick. Here we
Okay.
go. So before I start, I want to thank the school board. I want to thank Dr. Freitas. I want to thank the parents, the community, the teachers for allowing me to speak. Last night, I was reading The Landmark, and as a parent in this district, I've been really proud of where my kids have gone to school and everything that's happened, and I became enraged while I was reading it. The tone of the article, pardon me, the comments that were made, I was a little bit embarrassed to be reading it, if I'm being blunt. Dr. Freitas, I want to commend you. One of the comments that you had in there, you kind of took the blame of what was happening and said to put it on you. And I thought that was really great the way that you said, like, you have a good staff, we need to focus on the safety of our kids. And so thank you for that. That resonated with me. There were a couple of quotes that were in there. One was talking about the planned endeavor that the teachers did. And I'm going to be honest, yes. I hope it was planned. I hope it showed the absolute worst case scenario that could happen. I hope it mimicked everything that could possibly happen in the worst way possible to ensure that my children are going to be safe and that RB is ready for it. They talked about going virtual, not what students and parents want. Of course not. We want normal times. We want our kids to be able to go in school. I want my kids to have a normal high school experience, but these are not normal times. The survey that was sent out did not allow for the option of a virtual plan that was taught by RB teachers. Apex Learning, I did look into it. It had really low ratings. And so as an educated person, doing what's best for my children to make sure that they are on the right path, I was a little disappointed with that choice. My children have had wonderful, engaging, compassionate, amazing teachers at RB so far. I would hope that they would do online learning the way that it's supposed to be and that they are held to the standards that we would expect from them, because that's what I've received so far. But during normal times, I would love for my kids to be in person or in hybrid, but these, of course, are not normal times. And so my example is something that happened yesterday. Currently, the cross-country team is under quarantine for the next 14 days. You know, it's outside, there's under 40 kids, they're social distance, they're safe, but things do come up. And so it's not a blame, it's just a fact that these are not normal times. You know, this morning while most people were doing their morning routine, I wasn't. I was taking my freshman son to get a COVID test. And it was really scary watching him do that, and then in the back of my mind worrying about my 91-year-old grandmother that he had come in contact with. So I just think right now we really need to focus. Our main concern needs to be on the health and well-being of our students, supporting their virtual learning, making sure our teachers are ready, helping to support them, and making sure that RB continues at the rigor and the expectations that we all believe it has. So thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. And we will, discussion items, discussion information items. At this point in the meeting, Board of Education manager may request to add an additional item. Okay. We'll go to the COVID information plan.
Okay, so tonight, the Board of Education will see two plans. Dr. Freitas and Ms. Lindquist chaired the, Ms. Lindquist was the primary chair of the Learning Subcommittee, so if you want to come up, please, and provide information on the two learning plans. Dr. Freitas, you wanted to introduce the two plans?
I did. I prepared a brief speech for the moment. Good evening, board members. Good evening, parents and students, everybody joining us virtually this evening. Guys, before we review the details of the fully remote learning options, I would like to address a couple of the concerns that parents and Board of Education members had about the emergency e-learning plan during this past fourth quarter that was not meant to be implemented for 9 weeks as a remote learning model. Some of the concerns were that there was not a set schedule for classes, that students did not get daily virtual interactions with their teachers, and that there was not enough work provided. The teachers were blamed for that, and that's not fair to put it all on them. Let's remember, guys, that we were in a state of emergency in COVID-19. People's lives were affected in many ways. There were students' parents that lost their jobs, teacher spouses that lost their jobs. All of a sudden, we had financial insecurity, which added stress to our lives. People were scared for their health. Some of our families got sick. Businesses closed. Guys, COVID-19 has turned our world upside down, and we're still trying to figure this out. Guys, I have a heavy heart tonight because this has been probably one of the toughest moments of my career as an educator, as an administrator. Guys, we don't know what kind of home environment our students had and the challenges our teachers faced. And on top of that, the guidelines from the state were changing daily. Guys, we were fighting for toilet paper in stores. Guys, understanding that state of emergency, I gave the directive to teachers to be compassionate to students and not assign more than 20 to 30 minutes of work per class. I did not require daily Zoom classes or provided a set schedule. I told the teachers to be flexible in grading following state guidelines. So I take full responsibility as the principal of RB for what happened fourth quarter. Guys, with that being said, I want to highlight some of the excellent staff members that we have at this school. There's a reason why RB has had the reputation of being a top-performing school, and it's the educators that come in and day out and do their best job. One of our teachers, Miss Christy Hughes, chemistry teacher, personally wrote words of encouragement on student sidewalks. Another one of our teachers, Miss Sandy Chaika, AP Computer Science teacher, hosted virtual classes from the hospital. And Mr. Dan Bonarigo, an AP Computer Science teacher and calculus teacher, was selected to be a founding virtual instructor to deliver exemplary AP Computer Science lessons by the College Board. We have teachers in RB that are recognized nationally for their excellent work ethic. We also had the music department create an amazing Apollo Award ceremony where they celebrated your kids, your sons, your daughters. Catch it on YouTube if you haven't. Guys, these were great examples of how our teachers engage and recognize their students during this global pandemic. I can go on and on about our teachers. I can talk for hours about them. Guys, but in order to move forward, we need to recognize the good and the bad, and we need to bring healing. Because if RB is to be an exemplary school, which I know we are, guys, we need to come together. So we're making adjustments to the fully remote options that will be presented tonight after surveying all the parents, students, and Board of Education members. We are mandating virtual classes daily. We've co-created a schedule. We've added more hours to live instruction, and the homework provided will be aligned to class expectations set by the teachers. Guys, and I know many of you guys wanted the hybrid. I know many of you guys wanted in-person learning, and it hurts that we're going the other way. But guys, the goal still remains in-person learning. That is the goal of the board, and I've heard many parents say that. But right now is not the moment. Right now is the moment to pursue a fully remote option. Guys, at our last board meeting, something that really impacted me greatly was hearing students talk about suicide and isolation. Guys, I'm not sleeping well myself. So my number one goal this year is to make sure that every single student feels connected to RB, that connection we had before COVID-19 arrived. So how are we going to achieve that? We've embedded student support and virtual office hours in both plans. We have hotspots available for students that don't have internet access. And we will be increasing wellness checks. So if you see me or my counselors or my staff knocking on your door, checking on your kids, okay? Guys, we care. We'll be doing that. I'm committed to that. We promise that. We will also be having many extracurricular activities go online because we know it means a lot to your kids. We're going to make sure that the students are connected. So as you hear the details of our fully remote learning plans, remember this. This will not be the fourth quarter. We've learned, we've reflected, we've improved. We hear you guys. We have clear expectations, and we've made adjustments. I'm really excited about this school year because I know we can be pioneers in remote learning. And before I conclude, parents, I heard you, I got some feedback. I'll be having a virtual option for those that want to attend, talking with Dr. Freitas tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. Please see our website or the e-blast that I sent to you all. We will go over the final remote learning option approved by the Board of Education. Guys, anybody that's been here at RB, students, parents, teachers, the board, my mentor, the superintendent, knows that, guys, this is such a challenging time. We haven't dealt with a global pandemic, and we're being challenged daily. Parents that want it in person, I hope you guys understand, okay? I hope you guys at least support remote learning at the moment. We're committed to doing what we can to bring everybody back. And that concludes my speech. I love the job I do. I love it every day here. I just hope that we all work together to heal, because we need the healing.
Thank you, Dr. Freitas. Why don't you start and jump into the learning plans?
This evening, we're going to be introducing two options of fully remote learning. One option mimics the traditional 7-period day, and the other option mimics a block remote with threaded support. As to go into the details of our plans, I would like to introduce our Assistant Principal Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Kylie Lindquist, who, just like many of our teachers, has performed magnificently in moving our teacher and learning forward, and I'm so proud to work with her every day. Ms. Lindquist?
Thanks.
Kylie, what plan would you prefer Mary Ann put up?
Option A is good.
Okay.
So, as Dr. Freitas said, we have two options to present to you tonight. Option A is similar in structure to the option that we brought to the board last week, and we went in and added some instructional time to this option and changed the structure of it a little bit. What I wanted to do is just go through, after telling you kind of what the structure looks like, give you some of the highlights on the challenges that we have identified. The Monday on both of these schedules looks the same. We are used to 1 day a week, providing teachers with a professional learning community time, time for our staff to meet together, our departments to meet together. And that time is precious because, you know, we're working in a situation now where I certainly never taught in a virtual environment, and I don't know many people who have. When they sign up to teach high school, we're used to teaching kids face to face. And so we talk a lot about the fact that this is an experience that is in some ways putting all of us back in our first year in the classroom, because we are adjusting to a new normal. But the highlights for option A, as you will notice, this schedule allows a student to complete their full 7-period schedule over the course of 2 days, because we have expanded the instructional time within each period to 65 minutes. So what you see when you look at this schedule is a 65-minute period followed by 30 minutes of support for students, where if I am a student and I'm in my first period math class and I'm someone who maybe takes a little bit longer to get it in math, I can stay for 30 more minutes with my teacher in the Zoom that we've already established. We don't have to walk away, we don't have to come back or make a special trip back into the classroom, the virtual classroom. And I can stay and get that extended support. If I have questions, this might also be an opportunity where some students who are really getting the concept or maybe supporting some of their peers who might be struggling. So we're using that 30 minutes of support directly embedded after the class in order to allow a more continuous support period. This, we're thinking, would allow students to process information and practice between periods with the teacher if they need that. Students might be more likely to use support, we felt, in this particular structure, because, for example, if I am a social studies teacher at RB, I might teach Western civilizations to sophomores or freshmen, and I might teach AP economics to seniors. And we were thinking that if we aligned a support with the actual class, that maybe our freshmen would be a little more comfortable coming into that support. They might not be intimidated by the fact that there could be a senior who's in that particular place. If I'm a language student taking Spanish 1, I might want a dedicated time to come get support from my teachers when there's not an AP language student necessarily in there with me. So we felt like that was very important for students. The extended period, the 65-minute virtual period, would allow for students to engage in activities like longer writing assessments, sample practices of SAT practice, of AP practice, or assessments that have been created by the teacher that maybe some students might need a little bit more time on. And there's time in this for a little bit longer of a break for students. We talked about screen fatigue, and we certainly, I know there were definitely some people who perhaps poo-pooed that notion. It's definitely something that we are considering and that we think is very realistic. Having taught for a long time in a classroom, I know that by the end of the day, my 7th period class was always a struggle. For the 13 years that I taught, my 7th period class got to me, and I thought, boy, they're gonna get the best of me today. And so I wonder what that is gonna feel like for a student having sat on Zoom since 8 o'clock in the morning when it hits 2:15, and they might be a little zoomed out, pun intended. So that was one of the challenges of this schedule. Another challenge that we felt, I'm sorry, that's a challenge of the other schedule. One of the challenges we felt with this particular schedule might be that every other day occurrence of a class, right? The extended period does let us have a little more depth to our classroom instruction because we've extended the time. But if, let's say, a student misses a Tuesday and they miss their 3rd period calculus because they're ill or they have a doctor's appointment or something of that nature, they're not going to see that teacher again until Thursday. So an absent student might be missing more time. That's something that we thought we might need to consider with this. And we also thought a challenge of this schedule could be that the student who really does rely on that support after each one of the classes might have a very limited amount of time to utilize those breaks, those movement breaks, get up, stretch your legs, have something to eat, use the washroom, those types of things, because they might be locked into that support. A highlight of this schedule, as you have likely seen, you've taken a look at these, I believe already, the synchronous virtual instruction time in this particular schedule is 20 hours and 5 minutes. We were really shooting for that 20-hour mark, and you will notice that option B does have more instructional time. But what I will say about this schedule, just in going over it, is that the instructional time that is missing from this schedule that appears in the B schedule is entirely made up in student support. So the difference between the two models that you'll see tonight in instructional time is 3 hours and 55 minutes. And this particular option, option A, has 4 hours of support built in for students when you count the periods between each of the classes, whereas the next model, because it is a traditional 7-period day, does not have support built in because there simply isn't time to get that in. So I would say the every other day nature of the schedule, as well as the student support that is built in with this particular model, is the primary sort of foundational highlight to this particular schedule.
You want to go to option B first, and then we can take questions?
So option B mirrors more of a traditional 7-period day, and based on some feedback from last week and parent feedback as well, we present this model because if we are, if the Board of Education is looking for a more traditional day, this is certainly achieving that goal. You'll see that there is no orange on this schedule, which means there is no student support time built in because all of the time is being taken up for class periods. So this is a 7-period day where students begin just like they would at RB at 8 o'clock in the morning with their 1st period class, and they're in every Zoom virtual class period for 40 minutes. We built 10 minutes in between these periods because we recognize that there is a very significant benefit to being in the building and having the movement that comes with leaving my math class and going to my English class and being able to stop at the washroom and get a drink of water and use the bathroom. And we really wanted to give students an opportunity to do more than just run to the washroom really quick and come back. We want them to step away from their computers. We want them to have that kind of break, so that 10 minutes in between on Tuesday through Friday is very intentional. As I mentioned, the support is not threaded within this schedule. The thinking would be that if a student is meeting with their teacher every single day, that they might not need that support threaded in. We do still have the office hours built in at the end of the day for a student who, when 2:20 rolls around, says, gosh, Ms. Minot said something in 3rd period AP Stats, and I really need to ask her a question about it. So a student can get back to their teachers during those office hours. Those office hours would be hours where a teacher would have an open Zoom meeting, and they would be there open on Zoom for the entirety of the period. Students would not have to schedule time necessarily. They certainly could, but our teachers would be available on an open Zoom meeting for students to come in and out as they need to do during virtual office hours. So the highlight of this schedule, as I mentioned, this schedule represents 23 hours and 55 minutes of instructional time. There is no added support time built in as there was in the first one, but there is an hour and 45 minutes built in for virtual office hours. We certainly are concerned about screen fatigue, but that is something that we will have to evaluate after the first quarter and see if that is something that we feel is impacting our students. And I know that we've talked at the board meeting and amongst our administrative team about the need to survey and to really keep up on the feedback from all of our stakeholders. There is certainly some concern with regard to, with a 40-minute period versus a 65-minute period, you don't have as much time to go in depth, but the trade-off is you're seeing your teacher every single day. This is a schedule that, again, mimics the traditional schedule, so this is something that students would be very accustomed to. This is something teachers would be very accustomed to, because it would be essentially like taking what we do in the classroom and putting it on the computer. So that is some of the highlights of that particular schedule. Mondays are the same in both schedule. Monday is sort of the jumping off point for students. There is no office hours on Monday on either schedule because teachers will be in their PLCs receiving and engaging in much needed professional development and collegial collaboration in order to continue to grow and develop as virtual teachers as we find ourselves now.
Thank you, Kylie. Let me ask you a couple brief questions. Today's Wednesday.
Yes.
7:35.
Yes.
Board needs to make a decision tonight. There's 2 agenda items on this right now, on this agenda. If the board feels that neither one of these plans are good, the other option is that the board can amend the district calendar, push back the start of the school year until there's more time for planning or training. Okay?
Yes.
So those are really the 2 only voting options the board have on this tonight. The second question I have for you tonight is, if this needs to start on Monday, and based on all the feedback we got, both from parents that wanted hybrid, parents who didn't want hybrid, board members concerned with remote learning, parents who were concerned with how the fourth quarter went, everything that we've been taken on as an administrative team, or taken in, I should say, over the last 3 months, 4 months, since we ended e-learning. Which of these 2 plans, as our curriculum expert for the district or the assistant principal curriculum instruction, which of these 2 plans can we hit the ground running with Monday morning and students will have success?
Option B.
Option which one?
Option B, the 7-period traditional day. I certainly think that there are a lot of reasons why both of these plans are good, and I think that our teachers and our students could be successful in both of these plans. The plan that provides for the least amount of a learning curve for both of our staff and our students, and allows us to hit the ground running immediately and dive into content is the 7-period traditional day.
Which plan can allow us to make up the learning gap that occurred from fourth quarter, as well as get close to achieving a traditional quarter of school in these first 9 weeks?
Option B.
I mean, I'm asking these questions because I understand, like, parents, this is not easy. I understand that people are upset on both spectrums. But at the end of the day, we got to make up some of the learning that was lost in fourth quarter and being thrusted into e-learning or remote learning for 9 weeks. And we're starting a new school year off in almost the same exact spot. And so what we're trying to do today is identify a plan that will help close the gap of what we lost in fourth quarter and get us as close to finishing a real quarter in this first quarter. And so those are the reasons for asking the plan. I didn't have any input in the plan. I allowed Dr. Freitas, Ms. Lindquist, the instructional coaches, and the teachers worked on these plans over the last 2 days. I gave some feedback to Kylie. But what I want to make sure of is we don't have time for staff to figure this out necessarily. So I think with where parents are at, if the first 2 weeks go rough and we're on option A and teachers aren't familiar with how to teach in the block schedule and they're working through sorting that out and parents aren't seeing the rigor that they want to see, like, we don't get those 2 weeks back. So now not only do we have the 9 weeks where we had some gaps from fourth quarter, but now we added an additional 2 weeks from this quarter. And so my thought is if the block training needs to occur, or this is something that we need to visit so that if we need to use this again at a later date, or if we see that after the first 4 or 5 weeks there needs to be adjustments made, maybe that's something we could start doing as we implement option B to
Yes.
try to, is that something that could be pulled off?
Yes, I think that that's one of the reasons why we brought two schedules to you. A is an expansion of the original schedule, and I'll be, transparent in saying that I didn't think that we would be going remote maybe as quickly as we did, but as we have expanded the instructional time from the last meeting of that A schedule, I think you're exactly right. We need to be able to provide some professional development to teachers. I never taught on a block schedule, so I can see myself saying, gosh, 65 minutes in front of a computer that's a long time for me to make English happen and make people like it and not want to come through their screen at me. So I think that what sets our students and our staff up for the greatest amount of success would be the second schedule, the one that's on the screen now, that is new to the board this week.
And if I could add, option B, what really sold me, and in listening to you all and the parents, is the instructional time. Option B has almost 4 hours more a week. You multiply that by 4 in a month, that's 16 hours. By our 9 months of school, that's 144 additional hours of instruction. We're gonna need those hours to do well in AP. We're gonna need those hours to perform well on the SAT. We're gonna need those hours to perform well daily in our classes. So that's why I support, as Kylie said, option B, if the board chooses so.
Those are the questions I had as a superintendent. I don't know what the board members would like to ask, or the
Why don't we
students.
start with Janet?
Sure, I can jump in, and I'm sure as people talk, I'll come up with more questions. So, under A or B, what does success look like? Let me put it that way. How do we judge if this is working? Are we evaluating getting student feedback? How often can we get parent feedback? How often can we get teacher feedback? How agile can we be? We've been asked to be, I think, very agile. Everyone involved has been. Could we modify this in 4 weeks or in 5 weeks? Whichever way we go.
I mean, I'm happy to, I certainly, that's what education is to me, right? Evaluate and adjust and evaluate and adjust. And so Dr. Freitas and I are looking at, a communication plans that provides feedback throughout the quarter. We haven't nailed that down in terms of like how frequently, we haven't gotten to that stage yet. But I would say from the administrator side of me, I would be happy to make adjustments if that's something that the board would support after a certain amount of time and we evaluate and we get that stakeholder feedback and we see if this is working. One of the ways that, you mentioned, how are we gonna know? If we have a schedule like this and we see that kids are showing up for third, fourth, fifth period and they're not coming to first, second, sixth, and seventh, then we know that the 7-period day maybe is not working, right? If our teachers in our 7th period class are unable to, get our students to kind of get with it and be still engaged and rocking and rolling because they're fatigued, we're gonna know that. And I think I would happily make adjustments.
And if I could add, Kylie, to what you're saying, the same things we're doing now. Looking at our attendance metrics, engagement level, looking at the grades the students are earning, looking at the assessments the teachers are giving, all the things that we have done in our traditional school, that's how we would measure success. And of course, we would be more than open to make adjustments as we look at what's going well and what's not.
So I think those are very sound answers. Thank you. But I think when the board meets again, I think I'll speak for a number of us. We'd like to see some quantifiable data, right? Like on attendance, on grades. One of my other questions would be about standardized testing. Does that open up time in the schedule? Do we not have as many standardized testing requirements this semester going in? Does that time get translated over? Nothing's been said on that front? Okay.
I don't know if the state's made a
They
determination.
have not made a
Not
decision.
to my knowledge,
Okay.
the state has not made a determination on like IAR or some of
Right.
the other mandated state tests.
So I think that to me is an interesting question mark that I'd like to, obviously the information is flowing on a somewhat irregular basis, but my sense is if those tests are not taking up as much calendar time, that again is more instructional time to help us
bridge the gap from last year and move forward. I would certainly be supportive if the board has any voice in, somehow waiving some portion of those tests to do so because of these unusual circumstances. So those are my general questions. I'm sure I'll get back to more. I'll turn it over to Mona.
Tom, do you have any
I'm sorry,
questions? Tom? He's still there?
He's on.
No, not at this time, thank you.
Okay.
Feedback.
Wow, cool.
No, not at this time, thank you.
Let's jump to the sides of this
Oh,
question.
Ramon, you want Ramon?
I don't get to go.
No, you'll go before me.
You could just jump in.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate your comments, Dr. Freitas, about the increase in instructional minutes, because a lot of the emails we have received from parents, they're very concerned, kiddos that are in AP. The AP test isn't going to be any easier at the end of this year. So I very much am concerned about the amount of instructional time, the kids that are going to be taking the SAT, ACT. Those tests aren't getting any easier, so I do worry about the learning loss that occurred at the end of last year, and we really have to make that up. I had a question, Wes, you brought up about how the building is going to be open for students to be able to come and, what did you say, a safe, quiet place with internet access to engage in remote learning. What does that look like for students with either of these plans? If we, I mean, are we capping the number of students who can come in?
We got this expectation tonight from Mr. Smithing, so we're working on it. We
Okay.
talked about it a little bit, but we have to put together that protocol.
Well, I appreciate having that for maybe some of our students that have a lot of younger siblings, parents working at home. Things might be a little bit louder at home, so I appreciate having the building open so they have a quiet place to come and learn. But I just want to make sure if the building is open that the kids here are social distancing, are being safe, that the surfaces are being wiped down, like all of that. So, and I know you'll work through it.
Right.
And then for parents who don't watch our board meetings, how do we get the word out about that?
We'll send out formal communication once we have that plan in place. I don't anticipate that being ready to go Monday morning.
Okay.
I anticipate that hopefully by the end of the first week. We've talked a little bit today whether using the field house or the cafeteria, so that's one student per table, and we limit it to, obviously it has to be less than a group of 50, unless additional restrictions are applied, it would have to be smaller than that. But we have the ability to open our cafeteria in the event students need a quiet place to go. We would have to work through with our educational support staff on how that would be staffed to make sure we have proper coverage. We believe we have the protocol in place in regards to scanning visitors to the building, so that we still are working through the final details of that plan.
Okay. And I agree with Deanna. I would love some kind of survey the students, survey the parents. I don't know what the timeline, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, just collect some kind of data. And I'd love to see some type of attendance, engagement data, just to make sure that, if we have a student that is regularly not attending a Zoom, that they're okay, that they're not home alone, just to make sure they're okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Will you come back? We can just keep-
Oh, I'll jump in.
No.
Well, I know you mentioned, Kylie, that on the first plan, you got the student support, but it does seem that on option B, while you have your regular classroom, that does seem to open up some opportunities for students to talk with each other on the Zoom meetings. So there hopefully could be some lively discussions. Students learn from each other and they can engage. It's just, I wouldn't expect that students are going to be talked at on the Zoom meeting for 40 minutes.
Oh, no.
I'm hoping that there's interaction, there's a lot of things that can happen on that meeting. They can do breakout groups.
Yep.
Whereas I am a little concerned when it's a student support, it might only be one student and they lose the opportunity to work with each other. Whereas in the traditional model, maybe with some of the breakout rooms on Zoom, they can then take that class and then kind of get in small groups. So I think there's some promise in this Model B there.
My turn now?
Sure.
Okay. I just want to thank the team that worked on bringing us two options, because it's nice to see two options, right, and have a choice. And I know the community knows that you're committed to providing, right, the best education possible. I think that being a teacher, I haven't never taught high school, but right, like even though this option B doesn't have the orange, teachers do that during their regular
Yes,
day
of course.
anyways, right?
Absolutely,
Like
yes.
I give my lecture piece or
Yes.
my directives to my students, right?
Yes.
Then I give my guided practice, and then we have independent practice, right? For formative assessment and all those, and we have kids in groups, or they're doing it on their own. And so even though it's not built into the plan, I think teachers do that
It's
anyways,
natural, yes.
right?
Good teaching, it's
That's the way
natural.
we teach,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So I think even though there's not orange on here, there in essence could be.
Yes.
Just depends on how the teacher, and some days, some lessons, some curriculum lends itself to that better than
Absolutely.
others, right?
Yes.
So I think that's, and then the office hours at the end, and the built-in PLC and PD time is gonna be very, very important, regardless. And thank you for, listening to the directive of the board to beef it up, right, with the additional minutes. That was huge. And then I just wanna say for some of the families that are watching too, and some of the people that are here, some of the IDPH guidelines with the cumulative contact and some of those other things, that's really why we had, with school starting so soon, we had to flip to remote because we didn't really, there was no time to put those additional things in place and do it well and make sure that our kids were gonna be here and be safe, right? And that's the first thing. And I also just wanna mention that, and I'm pretty sure my assistant superintendent is pretty on the ball, and so I don't know if it was late on Monday or early on Tuesday morning, but probably about 11 a.m. or 12 p.m. on Tuesday is when I got the email from my assistant superintendent that said the state finally released the guidelines for the standards,
The
right?
priority standards,
The
yes.
priority standards.
Yep.
So some schools started last week, you guys started this week, I'm starting next week, and the state is finally telling us what they think is
Yep.
important for us to teach. And so, even though I know that building relationships with our new students is paramount, how can I even plan for any instruction if I've gotten, I mean, of course, I know our district and this district went ahead and started doing it anyways, right? Because in essence, we know better than the state, I think.
Yeah.
On a lot of these things. But right, it's such a fluid, I guess my point is just to show what a fluid situation it is, and that we as educators on all levels are just trying to do the best that we can.
Yes.
And I know that everyone here, every employee in this building, from the custodians all the way up to Kevin, right, say, I want to do what's best for kids. And sometimes we don't always agree or think that the same thing, but I know, and I used to tell myself this when my kids went to this building, like that's not the way I would do it if I was their teacher. But I know that every day, these people that, and I used to tell my kids this too, every day they get up and look in the mirror when they're getting ready and say, I'm gonna make a difference in the lives of kids. I am, right? Because I'm not doing it for the money. I'm not doing it for the money, or the hours, right? Because I can't tell you how many times I've been up at 10, 11, 12 o'clock grading papers, right? So I know that's not really a question, but I get to have my time, so that's what I get to
Have
say.
more time, go.
No, so I'm done.
Yes, I do.
But I just want everyone to realize that, the state is not as supportive as they could be.
So, couple questions. The committee that came up with this, the union was on that committee, represented by who?
Well, yeah, because it was Dr. Freitas, myself, Kevin Baldus, Beth Augustine, Dave Mannon, and then teachers, and all the teachers are union members.
So how
Who's
many
on-
teachers?
who was
and
on the
who
youth?
was on the
So, Along with the administration, I pulled all 7 of our instructional coaches. So we have 7 instructional coaches to represent all of the departments in our building. And then the teacher members of the instructional subcommittee from when we met this summer. So there were 4 additional teachers besides the instructional coaches that joined us on this committee.
So who are those?
Oh, instructional coaches, Wendy Cassens, Christy Hughes, Lindsay Mina, Aubrey Prince, Juan Tinoco, Aaron Cunningham, Nikki Anderson. Who am I missing? Aaron. Yeah,
Who are
and
the 4
then
teachers?
Doug Schultz, Dan Bonarigo, Mark Helgeson, and Jenna Osborne.
And so Dan is the union president.
Dan is the union president.
Doug Schultz is on the exec board.
Yes.
Mark Helgeson's on the exec board.
Yes.
Ms. Castens, are you on the exec board? I am. Okay. Ms. Minow? Yep. So the union has seen these plans, so we're not gonna
Yes.
get
I'm just
changes.
saying
I mean, this is,
Yes.
We're all
yes.
in this together,
Yes,
right?
this is a
That was
collaborative
my-
process,
That was
yes.
getting my point there.
everybody's,
We're all in this
everybody's
together.
nodding their
We
head
don't want
yes.
committee to point
Yes.
Yes, good.
Onward,
So,
onward, ever on.
I got a couple questions about this block scheduling.
Okay.
This block scheduling learning. So, in a theory, would you teach 2 sessions in a block, so to speak? Or how does, explain how it works, because I don't,
So
obviously,
blocks-
I went to this traditional
Yeah.
lesson in the 80s,
Yeah.
and now there's new learning formats,
Right.
so.
So
I'm trying
schools
to-
that use the block often, some of the schools that I'm familiar with, maybe will have one day where a kid goes through all of their schedules. So like on a Monday or whatever day it might be, I go through 7 periods to touch base with all of my teachers. And then the rest of the week is sort of split into A days and B days when you're on the block. So you meet essentially with half of your schedule in one day and half another day. And the whole purpose that schools go to that is because there's an opportunity then to elongate the lesson, right? So it's not 45 or 50 minutes. A lot of block schedules maybe are 75 minutes, potentially 80 minutes, right? So that students are getting more depth when they're with them, and that's why they don't meet every day, because they meet for a longer period of time.
So it's more like, when I went to university, and we had an hour-and-a-half class, right?
Yes,
And it was an extended.
yes,
Yeah, almost like a lab built in.
right.
So
And then you
there's
only go on
schools-
Tuesdays and
So
Thursdays,
there's-
right?
There's a lot of schools that do this in an in-person
Yes,
Yes.
situation.
yes.
What would it take for us to go to that type of, how much training does that take?
Do you mean for us to go like for RB, like our traditional schedule to be block, or do you mean remote?
Oh, yeah, in a traditional in-person.
Like if we were in
if there was
school-
no COVID,
And this whole
What kind
junk
of-
didn't happen with
Yeah.
COVID.
what kind would we have
I
to take?
think.
A month of training in the
Oh,
summer,
no,
2
no.
weeks?
This is I mean, I can see Gina and Ramona 2 years maybe. Something like a change like that, number one, it's a philosophical shift, right, for a district to engage in. And then it really does take sustained, prolonged professional development. So when you see schools, we've talked about standards-based grading before, or a shift to block scheduling, you're talking about, I think a 1-year training window is like fingers crossed that 1 year is enough, because that seems short to me, but I think you're talking about 2 years at most of sustained, repetitive professional development to support that kind of a change.
Because what also comes along with that is the revamping of curriculum, updating, of the lessons. So yeah, it's a multiple year process if we want to go that route, but we'll be more than happy to explore that if that is the board's wishes.
Well, no,
No,
we're trying to explore it in 2 days.
In the future, in the
You're
future.
telling me it's gonna
You
take
scared
2
me a minute
years to
there.
get it right in person, and we're gonna do it in 2 days on.
Well, there, as I
on a
mentioned,
screen? That concerns me, right?
when we went back to the drawing board with Schedule A, we added significant amounts of instructional time. So that is why, in considering, once we added some instructional time to this and went, oh, okay, this is 65 minutes, we started thinking about the fact that this is gonna require some legwork. Let's look at another option that would be something that would be, hit the ground running more effectively.
Okay.
Can I ask, is there a different impact on the services special education students receive from option A to B?
It's why he's here. And then after that.
I didn't mean to
we'll-
cut Wes off, it
Our
just popped into
students
my
have,
head.
No,
Wes,
that's
if you're
down,
done,
that's like,
after Mr. Baldus, our students
Yeah, I
have
had
some.
something.
Because I
Okay.
think we got an email on
Questions.
that too.
Question being.
Ask it again.
I'm just wondering if, what the impact is on students who receive special education services on Schedule A or Option A versus Option B.
I think right now, the communication that I've had with my special education staff is that we've got 2 plans ready to go, either which one we pick. The A, with those long extended period of times, would allow a more intensive educational setting with those kids, with related services even come in to embed into those class periods. Option B, it would require us to do, well, so I'll go back to A. A is going to be a little more challenging, the fact that if you look at the schedule, that green, can I go back to A real quick, please? That on the Wednesdays, the green block that is at 8 o'clock is a virtual time where I'd actually have to have my teachers that teach 4th period, put 4th period in that spot there. And then Friday, 8 a.m., I would have to take 7th period and have that 7th period put in that block there. The reason being because our kids won't be in the building after lunch period. So they would be exiting the building at some point around 12:45 to exit to go home. And that's conversations I've already had with those 2 teachers that teach that course. They're flexible to make that happen if need be. It does only allow them to be in person for that science class and that social studies class 1 time a week, where the other classes like English and math and possibly reading are 2 times a week in person, like a longer extended period of time. But that's just something that we'd have to be flexible with and maybe creative. Under B, it's option B, taking into account the transition kids, the core, kids in core, social thinking, pride, and some other kids that my staff has come to me and said, I think this kid would really, really benefit from being in person for reading interventions or other such things, would require us to have like an alternating day, where Tuesday would be from 8 o'clock till that lunch period, and then on Wednesday, they'd have to come in PM session. Thursday would be an AM session, Friday would be a PM session. The reason we'd have to alternate those days is so those kids will have an opportunity to be in person in all their classes given that week. Originally, I talked about doing, say, AM and AM and then a PM, but then some of the staff, and I met with them yesterday talking about these 2 plans, and one of them said to me, well, do you realize that kids would have 4 days in a row where they wouldn't see a class in person? And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. So we have to do that alternating schedule. The other consideration I have to take into account for is transportation for these kids as well. With LADSI and setting up Grand Prairie Transportation, that all those groups, transition, core, would have to be on that same alternating schedule because we want to transport kids in the morning and the next day in the afternoon instead of having two runs in a day. That's just not cost effective to do it that way either.
so I thought they're in person?
Yes.
I thought we were remote. I'm confused.
These kids have been flagged because of their IEPs and because of the need to be in person. Many of those kids need one-to-one interaction in order to work on the skills in which they are working on through their IEP.
So how do we do that safely?
So it depends on which population. The largest group that we have, the core kids, is 12. We have the spacing in one location in the building. The cleaning protocols that we'll be going through after each period. Also, there are a couple of kids that we have had directive from LADSI and support with LADSI about how to work with those kids to be safe for them and for us.
Are the teachers comfortable with that?
They are ready. They are ready. They are waiting for me to call them after I leave tonight to tell them what we're going to do so they can communicate to the parents what their day looks like. We've got a document that we created that they have communicated with the parents and asking how many days a week they'd like to have their child in session. What some of those are just for a certain class period. Some are just to come in for related services. That the related service people are also waiting for me to let them know, are we going A or B, and then we put those things in motion.
Thank you, I appreciate it, because I know a lot of parents have questions about that.
Yes.
Well, I'm a fan of in-person learning, so
So, yeah, speaking from students' perspective, I think that B would be better because we made our schedules based off of that model, and I feel like that's not really the schedule that we were doing when we were making our schedules back in November even. And like maybe I had an early release that I would only have half a day of school that day. I think that there's a lot of factors, and we made our schedules based off the traditional model, so I don't think that A would fit us in that regard. Also, I think it's a harder transition from Monday to Tuesday through Friday, because on A, there is no student support or virtual office hours, and I think that'll be weird going into the week like that. But with B, we're already starting off Monday like that, and then going Tuesday through Friday with the same schedule. I also think that with student support, if students already finished their work and knew what they were doing that day, what are they going to do for that 30 minutes? Are they going to play video games? Are we going to watch TV? Like, I don't know what we'd be doing. Maybe we could find useful time, obviously, but I still think that putting us on schedule would be option B. And then, yeah, we can always ask for help like we have during last year in the morning or in the afternoon. Teachers always can email us, and that's always worked for me before. I never had to, like, if I had questions at home for, like, math, I would just email my teacher a picture, and then they would just help me out with that. So I don't think that that's really necessary like it is in option A.
Oh, do you mind if I speak?
Really,
First,
yeah.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Or for the Zooms, are you guys requiring that students put their camera on? Because for all you know, they could be like napping. But back during fourth quarter, no one had their cameras on really.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a great question. It's like, will there be Zoom etiquette?
Yeah, like
And
I
will it
feel
be
like
standard?
they should have to have their cameras on this time around if we want it to be like actual
agree.
school. But anyway, I kind of disagree with Michael. I do think it's better to have the full schedule in one day, but I feel like option B just is not enough break time, because being on Zooms for that long of a period, like all day, that's a lot. And that's a big change from fourth quarter even, because most classes didn't even do Zooms, and I just think it's going to be a tough transition. But I think if there was a way to give kids a little more break time, I think that would help a little bit. But I do think that we do need to make up for lost time, and the best way to do that is having all 7 periods in one day. And that's the most normal thing to do, to be the closest to how it was before the
Lily,
fire.
you still gotta remember too, one of those 7 periods will be your PE class, so that PE teacher that day might assign you to go outside, take a run, take a walk, come back, take a picture of your Fitbit or your Apple Watch.
Yeah.
So that class is built in there. Some students that don't have 7 classes already have a 40-minute break in there because of their study hall, their academic support.
Well, like for me, I have last period PE, so I'm just sitting through the Zooms for every other period in
So you
a
got
row.
6, possibly, right?
What?
6 possible Zooms with the
yeah.
lunch built, a 40-minute lunch in the
Yeah.
middle? Okay.
Well, it will be.
I had a question about on a Monday.
I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted
thought
to talk to Lily, and this is probably something that Mrs. Lindquist would say, but right, there's gonna be some onus on the teachers to figure out how to navigate all that, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that they're checking in with you on your social emotional needs for those, especially in the beginning, right? What can we do, what can't we do, what's engaging, so they'll figure, it's all, I mean, I'm not in on the planning meetings, right? But I
Yeah.
know in my district, right? So what are we doing to build relationships, getting to know kids, making sure that they are comfortable, And I go back and forth with the camera on. I think, for me personally, I think it's somewhat of a discussion between the teacher and the student. I don't know that there's any absolutes, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I
Right.
think there are circumstances where the kid, it's okay if their camera's off, for sure.
Right, I mean, especially at
And
the
you
high
know how
school
their
level.
house situation is at home.
Well, there's,
Right.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, and I'm with you. I think as someone who's on Zoom calls for all day long, you're absolutely right. It's draining, and you
Yeah.
probably don't want to be seen for every single hour, because maybe in second period, you're having your second breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Or you're having your snack. And so I think to the point of like discretion and, you know, these are high school students, you're steps away from adulthood. You know, navigating this and working out that teacher-student relationship of what makes sense for each class is kind of what I would prefer, as opposed to making it a dictate of some sort, because that gets a little bit different. I think the big difference from the spring is that you're gonna see attendance in each period, right? That was not the same in the spring, so that to me is a real distinguishing factor.
Yeah.
And we did
And guys-
talk to that point, the instructional coaches and I talked at length about the conversation about the screen being on. We err on the side of what Mona was talking about in terms of, and you seconded the discretionary piece. The camera presents an issue of equity, if I'm being honest, right? If I'm a student who doesn't necessarily feel great about where I live, or about my bedroom, or about what I look like when I see myself on the screen, that can present a lot of issues of anxiety, of depression. I know that I get a little, after a while of having so many eyes on me when I'm on a screen, right? Someone might not have a home situation where they have a quiet, alone place to be, and they might have a mom or a grandma or someone walking behind them. So we want to be really cautious about what the situations are that we're putting our students in because of that SEL piece, because they aren't in front of us for that relationship and for that kind of check-in. So the instructional coaches and I were really feeling like we wanted students to be able to make a choice that made them feel safe, you know, and made them feel the most secure. I always go back to Maslow, right? If a student feels safe and secure, the same way with adults, then they can achieve their highest potential. But if their basic needs aren't met, then they can't go to where they need to go.
And
I just want to make a comment, though. We've heard consistently, we got to fill the gap from what happened in the fourth quarter. I saw a college student finish her quarter on Zoom. If there's not active participation, instructors require the camera on, because that way nobody's sleeping, nobody took a hike. So that's going to be up to instructors. That's in our role. I don't even know we're discussing it, but what we know is that there was a gap for a quarter.
Yep.
And whatever we need to do to close the gap.
Yep.
If it means sitting at a Zoom with camera on because people don't want to be present for the class, then maybe that's what we have to do. But we are present in class when we are here in the building. Nobody's covering up or taking a second breakfast when you're in school. So
Yeah, I
this
think-
is the
Maybe
deal.
that could be something, though, when we survey, we could really ask the teachers how it's going, because, you know, as somebody who delivers professional development for the last 6 months through Zoom, it's very difficult for me when I'm providing professional development and I can't see anybody who I'm talking to, and I feel like I'm just talking to the wall. And when I ask a question and it's crickets, I don't know if they're sleeping.
Right.
I hope not.
No, I
But
have
maybe
found
it's
it-
something we could ask the teachers and say, and start off with discretionary and just say, how's it going?
Yeah, we're getting a little in the weeds.
Right, like,
I
think-
exactly, and it
Yeah,
might be
I
fine.
found being on Zooms all day long, and it went from everybody was on the camera to everybody's off the camera.
And
We're
guys,
much more effective when everybody's on the
I
camera.
wanted to add that the students will be required to log in. But as we said, you know, this could be an equity issue, and, you know, we wouldn't want to make a student feel uncomfortable. So students will be logging in, and I'm actually working right now. Unfortunately, I didn't get the results that I wanted to establish some kind of formal virtual background. Picture a student logged in showing their face with Rouser in the back. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? But the struggle is right now is the Chromebook device, and using Zoom and using Google Meet doesn't allow at this very moment to have a virtual background. But just so everybody knows here, we're working on it, and the minute Zoom, allows us through the Chromebook device to use a virtual background or Google Meet, we will make sure that we move that forward. Because I do agree. Let's see the kids. Let's interact. But we're working on that, okay?
I had a quick question.
Yeah, Lily and Michael.
Are there laws pertaining to putting on the webcam? Like, are there laws that, because we're a public school, I don't know if there's any laws that say that, oh, you have to require a student to turn on a webcam.
We could check on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the great thing, I think we're getting a little bit into the weeds here. I think the great thing about Zoom is, if a student had a family emergency, or they have somebody quarantined, or the great thing about Zoom is you could either video in or you can call in. And so there's no excuse that a kid can miss that instruction with their teacher on a daily basis. So I understand we're trying to hit all targets right now, but I think the fact that we're having teachers do synchronous learning for almost 24 hours on Zoom or Google Meets, and kids are getting face-to-face interaction with classmates and teachers is a great start. If there's a day where a kid's having a bad day, or maybe is quarantining and is sick and don't want to turn their camera on, that's the least of my worries, as long as they're logged in and getting the content. So I think we just have to allow the professionals, the teachers, to manage this process and kind of work through that. And again, we could have the feedback sessions every 4 weeks or 3.5, whatever we decide, where parents and students can say, hey, this is going well, this isn't going well. And so we have 3 board meetings from now until the end of the first quarter, where the members of the administration, as well as members of the committee or the union, can come back and speak to the committee and give their feedback, as well as the student data or parent data we gather. So I think those are things we could all work out after the first couple weeks.
Kylie, would you be able to explain, how it would not work or how it could work if we were to alternate weeks? So option A, week 1, option B, week 2. I don't know the logistics of it, and I'm sure it's not there's no easy answer, but maybe if I hate to put you on the spot here, but maybe
No,
if
it's okay.
Dr. Freitas or Dr. Skinkis, might be able to just.
My biggest concern would be anytime the thing that seems to be the most impactful in education is routine, and the repetition of doing something similarly right over and over. What would concern me doing that would be the constant switch up, that I would worry about maybe some of our kids, especially maybe some of our kids that struggle and that need really prescripted routines to be able to be successful in a certain area. I can certainly see why that might be positive, right? You're getting the best of both worlds then, essentially. My main concern would be just that, is, are we setting kids up to struggle if we're kind of flipping things on them every once in a while?
So, it's just more of a housekeeping question. I noticed on Monday lunch is considerably, it's not the same time as the other. What was the thought on that? Just because we're doing 1 through 4? What if you did 1 through 3 and then had lunch? It'd be the same time period.
Are you talking about
Option B.
on option B? The thinking behind that initially, before we expanded the class periods on the Monday, those were significantly shorter when we first built that model. So we had some virtual office hours at the end of the day there originally before we expanded out those periods. So that certainly could be something that we played with if that would be something that the board would want. There's not like a secret hidden.
It just struck me that
Yeah.
it was different. And we're talking about the routine, right? All right. I don't have any further questions.
So one more comment. I don't want to get back into the weeds of our prior discussion, but I think I want to tie it back to a point you made early on, Wes, about looking for a plan to allow students access to the building in a limited capacity, that people who do need space away from their home environment. And I think part of what we had talked about earlier as well was, and teachers who may want to work with small groups in person. I think we're obviously very supportive of that, moving forward. So kind of breaking up this day in some fashion to the extent possible.
All right,
Good?
good. I think we vetted this pretty well.
Brendan was next as athletics. Does the board want to vote on the plan first, or do?
Yeah, in case you're.
Yeah, I think we just vote on the plan, but I do want to get to the athletics. I think that if we vote on the plan, we'll probably take care of option C, or number C here.
Okay. Does the board want to vote on each option, or is there, do you want to straw poll the board to see if they prefer A or B better?
Well, I think it's just, I probably straw poll, I think, we'll start over here.
My preference would be for B.
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 Yeah, B.
I'm a
Tom?
B.
Tom, option,
Yes.
Which option, A or B, Tom? Traditional or the block?
Option B.
Okay. So let's just do the motion and vote on option B then.
okay. The Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the revised remote learning plan option B for the first semester.
Is it semester or quarter?
Yeah, I'm
First
sorry.
quarter.
I'm sorry, yes. Let me start over, please. The Board of Education Township High School District 208, Cook County, Illinois hereby approves the revised remote learning plan option B for the first quarter of the 2020-2021 school year as presented in the August 19th, 2020 Board Agenda Packet. Second?
Do we have a second?
Second.
Gina Sierra?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Tom?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, what happened to your foot?
Old battle injury from the gridiron days.
No, from the, probably some coach running you at quarterback, that's
Right.
what it was.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board.
Brendan, the Board of Education had just we have you on the agenda just to make sure, obviously with the concerns from the staff members presented over the last couple days, we want to make sure you can lay out your plan for athletics so that we're following the IDPH guidelines as well as, I think we're getting feedback. Ask Tom if he can mute, maybe.
Tom, could you mute on your end?
There we go.
Thank you.
The Board of Education wanted to discuss to make sure that we're taking the appropriate safety measures, because if it's not safe to have if staff members felt it wasn't safe to have students on campus, is it still safe to be running these activities? Are we following the protocol? What's your plan? What's your protocol to make sure the board feels that everything is being operated according to IDPH guidelines?
Sure, absolutely. Well, no question, given the recent shift with the landscape of the school, the academic side of things, concerns are growing in regards to athletics as well. We understand that. The athletic department has and always will place the safety and well-being of our student athletes above all else. I believe that we are all fully aware of the difficulties and challenges that we as a community and as a society continue to face on a daily basis. I will tell you that I'm obviously concerned about the future of sports and athletics from the grade school level to the high school or even to the professional level. It's certainly concerning in terms of players to coaches. There's even concerns with officials moving forward into the seasons that require officials. So obviously there's growing concerns on all levels. I'm certainly not a medical expert. However, I am a parent, and I'm a parent of two multi-sport athletes, and having to make that decision, over the course of the summer and even now as they begin to set out and participate in different athletic activities, contests. It's certainly concerning, but again, as a parent, as a coach, as an administrator, I think the upside of continuing with athletics far outweighs the risk for my children. And that's a decision that every parent has to make. We understand that. And at the end of the day, that's the deal for the RBHS parents too. You know, you look no further than one of the greatest academic institutions in the country, and the University of Notre Dame, right? And what they're going through right now. They had 80 male senior students, right, test positive. And if I understand correctly, that was a result of something that happened off campus. So you can have a great plan in place, but you still can't account for what might be going on when they're not with you, when they're not under the direction of their coaches. So moving forward in terms of like where we're at, I think RB has set the standard in terms of like the industry of athletics, in the sense that we ran our summer camps. We had over 550 athletes. We had 70 coaches. And I think we did a great job with it. Obviously, there's an element of luck in there too, but I think our student athletes listened to their coaches in terms of what the expectations were, not only on campus but off campus, and articulated those expectations with their parents as well. As we move forward now, and we know like the guidelines, the recommendations, if you will, they're constantly changing, right, in terms of what it looks like. As soon as you're shared something by the IHSA, it almost feels like it's outdated to some degree, because you know there's a modification coming 2 or 3 days later, and you're trying to anticipate what that modification is. We currently have approximately 193 student athletes participating in the 6 fall sports that are going on right now. 5 of those sports obviously take place outdoors, and then you have girls swimming and dive, which is taking place indoors. 2 of our sports, fall sports, are participating off campus, right? Where I'll touch on the transportation in a minute. The rest are all practicing and having their preseason camps since August 10th on campus. Everybody is screened before practice by a member of our athletic training staff and/or the head coach. Head coach is also screened by our athletic trainer, Bill Fry, and Luis Hidalgo. Obviously, we know the 2 staples are, right, the social distancing piece and the face covering, right? When a student athlete can't exercise social distancing, they're required to wear a face covering. Coaches, whether it's inside or outside nowadays, they're all required to wear a face covering. So that's kind of a blanket deal, and I think we're all kind of aware of that. I think where the concerns are growing in terms of transportation, right? So there's different information that's been provided by different resources. And keep in mind, we obviously have not participated in any off-campus competitions. We've had some off-campus practices with our golf teams, and that's pretty much it. But as we prepare to move forward and what that's going to look like, different information has been provided by different resources, IHSA, ISB, things of that nature. One thing is very clear: every school district is using their own interpretation. And basically, the IHSA recommends 6 feet of social distancing on a yellow school bus, which allows for approximately 15 people. The Illinois State Board of Education, the IDPH, recommends capping capacity at 50 people. And socially distancing as best possible. So you see the difference right there. One saying 50 is allowable, another is saying 6 feet of social distancing, which is approximately 12 people. According to IHSA Executive Director Craig Anderson, back in April and May, the IHSA shared their documents with the Deputy Governor Ruiz, who then passed them to the IDPH. The doctor that reviewed those documents went beyond standard protocol, and again, this is according to Craig Anderson of the IHSA, so he felt that the doctor that was reviewing that, and that was before the IDPH and the IHSA kind of merged in terms of their decision making. So he felt he went above protocol. So that, with that said, the IHSA has formally requested clarification from the IDPH, and they are still waiting for a response. So that takes us to what is Riverside Brookfield doing. At our RBHS Fall Coaches meeting, coaches were informed that we would limit capacity to 23. This is the most amount of people on one team that a team would need to travel to a competition for, and I think there's a chart in there we can reference later. I think it's girls cross country would have maybe 23 people traveling to an event. Keep in mind, this is the most amount of people on one team that would need to travel. We haven't had more than 15 passengers on a bus that I'm aware of. So from August 10th till now, the cap's been at 15 since the start of fall sports. We have numerous families that have submitted board-approved paperwork to drive their children to organize team activities. We are not using the minibuses. All passengers are screened before boarding and are instructed to wear a face covering while on the bus. So that's kind of the transportation piece in a nutshell and where things are at. I know there's a lot of information that I shared with you in that packet, but I think it just illustrates how each sport has, some of their own special recommendations, guidelines, if you will. And there's also some inaccuracies that you'll see within sports in terms of spectator, social distancing, transportation. So even within the guidelines that we're being provided with, they're not fully aligned yet. I think they're working on that. I think there might be more to come. But as far as the other schools in our conference, they are set to compete. One school has already had a golf match. So the other 11 schools in our conference are looking to move forward. Obviously, some of those schools just started sports today. Some are just starting tomorrow. So obviously, again, we started August 10th. I feel like things have been trending in the right direction. And obviously, there's some things that happen that are out of our control, but the coaches have been shared what the guidelines look like, what the expectations are through every stage, every phase. They've been provided with information going all the way back to April.
One day, 1 week at a time? Is that what you're recommending?
That's what I would suggest. One day at a time, 1 week at a time, and I think it's going to be a constant deal of monitoring, right? And if we do find ourselves in a position or a situation where it's just unmanageable, then obviously we need to revisit how we're doing things. And again, I think it goes back to you can have a great game plan, but sometimes things happen out of your control, and you need to switch things up. So that would be my suggestion, in my personal experience, to take it one day at a time and revisit 1 week at a time on a need basis.
So everybody coming, both coaches, students are screened. I mean, we wouldn't have a case where an instructor or a coach wouldn't be here during the day because they didn't feel right, but could come and coach afterwards, would we?
We wouldn't allow that. If somebody wasn't feeling well, we would encourage them. We would direct them to cancel practice for that day if another coach couldn't cover for him.
Because I feel if you can't be here to, teach or work, you shouldn't be able to coach.
Right, absolutely.
So there haven't been any concerns from coaches about their safety?
I think the biggest concern from coaches is what the transportation piece would look like. And basically, we talked to them. Some of the other suggestions that we made is we suggested if we need to go like on a week-to-week basis, like say this week, if we feel more comfortable going with an A-B day, so varsity's practicing on the odd calendar days, lower levels are practicing on the even number days, just to lighten the load a little bit until we get our footing. Shifting practice time, so if they were scheduled to practice 3:30 to 6:30, let's say, maybe they're just going to chop that practice time in half and focus on the lower levels for the first half, the varsity team on the upper half, whatever coaches feel most comfortable with, because there's different dynamics, like girls tennis has 50 student athletes, right? And for them to get on the 5 or 6 courts, that's kind of challenging. So they're kind of going to that shifted model where they have 2 different time slots. I don't know if that answers your question, but I haven't received any concerns from coaches stating that they didn't feel safe fulfilling their coaching duties.
Thank you.
Do you feel we saw an increase in the 5, 6, you said 6 sports?
And the
5
participation? I think so. I didn't get a chance to compare the numbers, but I think obviously there's a few athletes that where their traditional fall sport got kicked back into the spring, and now they're trying something different out. I think we have a handful of athletes that are doing that. Certainly saw a spike in girls tennis and in girls golf to some degree, so I think we're trending in the right direction. And I think, what better time for athletes to try another sport that maybe they couldn't have if it's a traditional
I just
three-season
assumed
school year.
the soccer players are probably also cross-country runners,
Sure.
right? They'd run a lot. You said there were 70 coaches this summer?
This summer, we had approximately 70 coaches that were
How many
involved
of
in our
those
summer camps.
how many of those are also coaches or teachers of the school?
No, there's
None?
probably a, I'd say, I'd have to go back and look, but there's a split. It could be, the needle could be pointing towards the teacher side a little bit more, but we do have quite a few dozen coaches that are coming from outside of the building, which
So if it was half.
professionals in another industry.
So if it was half, that'd be 35. Was there any concerns about coaching over the summer with the students?
Any concerns voiced by the coaches?
Yeah.
To me, no, I did not receive any concerns from coaches in terms of what they were asked. And when we started the summer camp, obviously there were like two phases. You had a voluntary strength and conditioning phase where kids were just kind of just coming out and doing body movements like air squats, lunges, running, things of that nature, no sports-specific activities. So coaches were encouraged to do that, but they weren't directed to do that. Most took advantage of that and did that. Most of them did it outdoors or just in the weight room. So that took place for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. And then as we transitioned into the traditional summer camp setting, it was virtually the same coaches. The same coaches had that option to start their summer camp. All programs had the option to run a summer camp. However, we did not direct them to say, you must run a summer camp. Obviously, they're strongly encouraged every year, but given the circumstances this year, it was their discretion on whether they wanted to run a camp or not.
So did anyone not run a summer camp?
There's a couple coaches that did not. I feel as though they had reservations going into the summer, even like when we set our summer camp up in January and February. Some had reservations based on, what type of enrollment numbers they're going to get. And like, obviously we would encourage those coaches, well, the more flyers you put out there, the more marketing that you do, the more athletes you're going to get. For whatever reasons, they elected not to run a camp this summer. And I think that was pretty consistent back in February and January, even coming back to June. It was pretty much those same coaches that elected not to run a summer camp.
So it was a pre-COVID decision more than it was a COVID-based decision.
The number of camps, I think pre-COVID and like post-March 13th, we're pretty close to the same. I think the big difference is there wasn't any more, we didn't have youth camps, right? And so I think that kind of changed the dynamics of what a camp would look like, what it could look like.
So let's pivot to fall. The fall coaches, are there any concerns about interacting with the students?
Falk, I have not fielded any concerns from coaches in terms of working with student athletes. I think the 6 head coaches that we have working are very passionate in working with their student athletes. There's a handful of new assistant coaches that are early on in their coaching career, but none of the head coaches have articulated any concerns to me. I think the other piece that's interesting to that, Mr. Smithing, is the next step after we kind of get a better handle on this is, what do off-season workouts look like? What do open gym workouts look like? Because every sport has now been afforded 20 contact days to use how they want, and that's where you can actually coach kids up. And I'm sure some coaches are going to want to do it, some might not want to do it, but between September 7th and October 24th, they have 20 days to use at their discretion. I don't know what that landscape's going to look like, but it'll be interesting to see who takes advantage.
So the fall coaches, how many total coaches do we have in the fall between head coaches and assistant coaches?
Well, we have 6 head coaches. We probably have another dozen assistant coaches.
And how many of those are employees of the school?
They're all engaged in terms of what they're doing. Obviously, we have one program that's currently quarantined right now that knocks out 2 coaches. But the rest, every coach is engaged and here every day.
So there's 18.
Right.
How many are teachers?
Probably a little less than 18, right? Girls golf has 1.
Girls golf has 1. girls cross country has 2, boys cross country has 2, swimming now technically has 3, right? Boys golf has 2, and then
But they're
tennis
not all
has,
teachers of the school.
2, so a little less.
Out of our fall coaches, I would say 75% are teachers.
75%.
Maybe let's err on the side of caution, say 70.
70%, and none of them had any concerns about interacting with the children.
None of those concerns were
That's
brought
good.
to me.
It's positive.
Obviously, you know,
Well,
we're
I
in
want to
touch.
ask you about the conference. Most of our conference, how many Catholic schools are there?
So there's 9 private schools in our conference. I believe it's 9. Just had a meeting, an athletic director meeting through Zoom today. All 9 are aiming to participate. Obviously, not all of them carry 6 sports. Some of them are carrying 2 or 3 or 4, but all of them are aiming to participate moving forward. The other 3 public schools, you have Elmwood Park, Westmont, and Ridgewood. From what I've gathered, Westmont is full steam ahead. Elmwood Park just started today, and Ridgewood is just in the process of starting up as well.
Does it impact us anywhere down the line because we have more private schools in our conference? If we are slow to the table on contest?
Well, it's hard to make a comparison. I still think, you know, RB sets the standard in terms of how we manage with the guidelines, the recommendations, and what that looks like. I've had some inquiries from those 9 schools. They're trying to create documentation that aligns the conference in terms of athletes know what to expect when they go to another school in terms of what the transition looks like getting off the bus. Coaches giving a roster to the other coach, event workers writing down like what parents, spectators, because at the sports, at the contest, only guardians or parents can go, but they still need to sign in. They don't have to give up contact information, but just so we can go back to that AD if we do need to do some contract tracing. So the conference has been pretty collaborative in terms of trying to get the seasons going. But, you know, I think it's the public schools that are kind of going slow and steady right now, where the private schools are full steam
Well,
ahead.
that's my concern, like, right? We should, if we're gonna put kids on a bus and they come, well, first, with swimming, I thought there was no spectators. Was that in the guidelines? Or there's still
I
spectators?
believe you can have spectators when they're 30 feet away or more. But, you know, for a majority of the sports, it's just parents.
Okay, so we just gotta check on the swimming one, because if we have that many girls in the pool, we gotta make sure we're not over 50 unless, I don't see how unless the IDPH approved being over 50 indoors, so we need to check on that. But the second thing would be, the last thing I would wanna have happen is some kids get on a bus, come to RB to maybe have a swim meet, or golf, well, we won't have to worry about golf match or anything, the rest of that's outside, but if we're scanning temperatures again before they come into our building, and some kid tests hot, what are they gonna do with that kid? They ain't gonna make him sit on the bus, him or her sit on the bus themselves, right? So we should probably work with, make sure that there's some protocol, and I don't even know if the IHSA covered this, but right, those schools should be self-certifying and doing temperature checks before they get on the bus.
Right.
So that we don't have any kind of, I would hate to put a kid in an uncomfortable position that, well, you know, the thermometer at such and such school came up hot, even though it didn't come up hot at RB. Like, we would want to try to make sure we're eliminating those problems before they occur.
Sure.
So are these 9 Catholic schools, they're all going to school in person, right?
Are the 9 private schools going to school in
Yeah, I don't
person?
think they're all Catholic. I think they're private.
Private school.
I think I think they are. I think there's some hybrids. I'm sure there's some remote learning within that. I couldn't rattle off the numbers right now, but I know that some of those schools were in session today. So there's a handful of them that are trying to work through the remote lens.
Board have any other questions on athletics?
So one issue I'd like to raise, not, I think for discussion at our next meeting, if this is a good time to do it, is I
Yep.
think we should talk about the student fees associated with athletics, and then the student fees associated with other clubs and activities.
Right.
And how we may want to handle that in light of some of the uncertainty and some of the virtual planning that's going on. So
Okay.
if we could get a report, I think, from.
Kristen, can you put that on for under the
Yeah.
I think in terms of
'Cause
anticipated.
we did make some adjustments to that last year in a general sense when
Right.
everybody was still in school, and I think there's room for adjustment for sure.
Right, I think we would need to know exactly what we're looking at, so we can have kind of a anticipated report and then talk about what our next steps would be.
Michael and Lily, do you guys have anything? No comment.
The board approved a memorandum of agreement last meeting with the RBEA in regards to stipends. So there'll be 3 categories of stipends. Essential stipends were approved. There's the remaining clubs and activities that could not, or could be done virtually were approved with some language, and then there's some language in regards to athletics. So there will be opportunities for extracurriculars offered to students throughout the year, whether it's virtual or in person, depending on all this goes. Tonight, I just want to make sure I have the okay for Brendan. I told him to suspend any in-person competitions with other schools until the board had this meeting tonight, to make sure you guys are okay with proceeding with trying to do competitions as well as while it's safe. We need to continue to monitor situations on a daily basis and guidelines on a daily basis. But, you know, I don't want you to feel like you have to succumb to the pressure of the private schools just because they're in our conference. You know, if we have less competitions this year, I think the kids will still want to compete, right? And so just make sure things are safe and in line with the guidelines, the IDPH. If Brendan does carry out those tasks, is everybody okay with competitions proceeding?
Well, I personally am all about in-person learning, so I'm all about in-person sports. And it seems we have no concerns from the coaching staff or the staff in general about it, so I don't see an issue why we wouldn't go forward.
You know, I do wrestle that it's hard to be in school. You know, it's just hard for me to, reconcile the two, but we can do sports. So that is hard for me to kind of reconcile. And I know the kids love sports. I have a college athlete, and that's, push to spring. They got a lot of things, but yet they're in school. So they focused, and the students are going to be in class. It's kind of a bitter pill for me to swallow, that we can have in-person coaching, we can have competition, but we can't be in the school for learning. That's a bitter pill for me. And maybe it's something that staff here might want to look at, because I don't see why sports should be more important than the academics. And that, to me, ocular seems to what has happened. Sports always seems to trump education. But if we're going to vote, we'll vote with the board. But I will say, it's very difficult. And I don't think I'm alone saying that.
I understand. Thank you.
Anybody else? So I don't think we need a formal vote. I just want to make sure that, based on Brendan's plan tonight, we're okay to proceed. A straw poll would be fine. I don't think it requires a formal vote.
All right, all in favor of continuing sports? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The nay?
Tom, speak up now if you have something to say.
No, I'm in favor as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, the one thing I would add is I'm in favor of all of these activities continuing to the fullest extent possible. I just think it's, for all of the discussion about social and emotional learning and giving kids a chance to identify with the school, these are all opportunities for that, and that's why I'm really in favor of it.
the mental health of the children is very, very important. And
We
this
can
is part of it.
control our students, try as best as we can, with protocol and guidelines. We have no control over other teams, how they're handling, we're assuming that they're going to be handling the same, with the same cautions that we are. But possibly, we encourage or give the coaches to communicate with the other teams. What are your guidelines? How are you monitoring, situations? I think in advance, I think it's fair.
Err on the side of caution, Brendan. I think the fact that kids are being able to work out with their classmates and participate in these activities is great. If we have some competitions, but not as many as usual because we can't get on the same page with the other school, the board, I don't think I'm speaking wrong for the board to say, we'd rather you have you err on the side of caution and skip that contest if we have to. Play it by ear.
Absolutely.
time.
You know, the definition of success in terms of athletics is being redefined, right? What does a successful season look like? Having some form of competition, right? To give those kids that outlet and give them a fulfilling experience. We know it's going to be limited contests. We're going from 16-week seasons down to 11-week seasons. So I think the kids know that, and I think coaches are aware of that, and they'll take what they can get. And to your other comment, Kevin, in terms of like the whole public-private dynamic, each sport is trying to come up with like pods, right? So a pod for cross country would be RB, Elmwood Park, Westmont, and Ridgewood, right? Just because we're pretty centrally located, like schools, like with like, and not having to bring a St. Francis or a Timothy Christian all the way out to Aurora Christian, all the way out to Riverside Brookfield. So we're trying to apply that as best we can to each sport.
And Brendan, I just wanted to say I'm really proud of you as the AP of athletics. I've seen your communication, I've been to your meetings, and you're doing a great job. But like the reality says, we always have to look at those guidelines, and things could change, right? We're having a contest one day and possibly not the next day, But proud of your communication and whatever support you need from us. We're here for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Freitas.
Thank you, Brendan. I know you got an injury. It's uncomfortable to sit. So, Mr. Mannon, I know this is kind of off the cuff. Do you have a minute to come up to the front, please? I'm sorry. And Ms. Prince, if you'd like to, I just want to make sure. I think we sometimes, we have a lot of students that are involved in non-athletic clubs and activities. Mr. Mannon is the Assistant Principal of Student Affairs. Did a great job setting up the orientation process this week with check-ins and the temperature checks and the one-way hallways. And the reason I wanted to call the two of you up here is if we're offering opportunities for students to participate in athletics in person, and I would encourage you, and I'm sure the board would feel the same way, as if we can come up with some protocol. If we could find ways for our activity programs or some of our music programs. I know there's a lot more risks with the music and instruments because of the aerosol and the spreading. But whether it's a small group meeting to do something after school, to do a little outdoor performance, or at least a little prep, I would encourage you two to be as creative as possible while keeping safety as your top priority, obviously. But I would hate to see that someone paint us in the corner of we're only offering these opportunities to the IHSA and those students. If there's opportunities to do in-person activities or performances, I would think the board would want to see both. Am I correct, or is that?
The more interaction that children have with children, the better, in my opinion. And that's the social and emotional connection there. And if you can take turns coming up and playing chess 6 feet apart, and we can do that in the gym, I encourage that. I want kids to be around kids as much as possible, even if it's as close as me and Michael.
And Aubrey, I didn't mean to put you on the spot tonight, but you did a really nice job putting together a write-up for the Board of Education on how you could do some of your stuff virtually.
Yeah, I can jump in and say some of our ideas. I wasn't prepared to speak, but I'm a good speaker, so I'm not afraid to talk if anybody knows me. Thank you for inviting me down. My name is Aubrey Prince, and I also am a member of the community as well, living in Brookfield. I've spent many hours with my fellow administrators, parents, teachers on the COVID committee over the summer, and also worked many hours with other colleagues, educators in my field of music to try to do our due diligence to provide the safest and most inclusive opportunities in our new normal. We have lots of ideas actually they're not even ideas, we have 3 really solid laid out plans for the theater program, for the fall play, and for the spring musical to make the best opportunity and get as many students involved in the safest possible way under the IDPH guidelines, our RBHS guidelines I talked about with Mr. Mannon, and also aligning with some additional professional studies that I've been following throughout the summer. The Colorado study is one that all of our professional music organizations banded together to fund, And through that study, we have found really great tools and also really important research to provide safe opportunities. Right now, the best way to do that is outdoors. We did run through the help of Kristen and Joel aerosol emission tests in our large ensemble performing spaces, the auditorium, the little theater. And the bigger the space, the more spread out with PPE is the way to go for indoor activities. I know I don't 100% feel super comfortable assuming indoor risk without extra masks and possible shields and greater social distancing, but I do plan on, with the support of the board and the parents in the program and the students, I know they're very excited about evening choral opportunities that we talked about during our in-person orientation. We're looking to do outdoor rehearsals on Tuesday evenings with the 3 curricular choirs to provide an in-person performance experience that we'll prepare for in our daily curricular programming. So, and I know my colleague did marching band camp and he did that super safely with small groups, rotating groups out on the field with the student leadership, and that was very successful, and they were very strict with their sorry, I'm saying a lot and I'm aware of it now, with the IDPH guidelines, so that was very successful. There's just risk everywhere, and we just, as good teachers, want to do our best to do those things safely. But I know my colleagues and I, we just cherish the RBHS kids, and we want to give them, we don't want them to feel like they're lacking or losing anything, so we will do our due diligence to provide them the best experience under the safest guidelines.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
I just was emailing Colleen, who oversees our speech team and shenanigans program and fall play and things like that, and just now about opportunities that she could present that will be socially distanced and appropriate. And we've had conversations like this times 10. Aubrey and I spoke earlier, really when COVID was really coming out, about, okay, how can we get both, the play and the musical out and events and concerts. And so we've had these ongoing conversations with staff about what can we do to present opportunities, because we know, obviously, the social outlets are key, to keep that social emotion, keep those connections together. And I'm really proud of the staff and the way our extracurricular sponsors have responded. They've all presented, their version of what it would look like virtually, potentially in a virtual sense, such as chess, and others in person if they could pull it off in a distance format. And I think we got a good thing going. What I'm asking them to do, though, is come down. I met with Mr. Helgeson today for Clarion and said, okay, here's what we're thinking. I would like to bring some students in, but here's our approach. And I said, yes, a great approach. Let's review it, but then let's also have the parents co-sign that. And so that the expectation is there from the students, the parents, the sponsors. We understand those expectations, what those protocols are. And I think Aubrey's doing the same thing with her group, which she just mentioned. And so, and then the follow-up, I think, is key too, just to make sure that the support's there from our end, from the administrative end, of whatever resources they need, but also just to connect up and see, are we being safe? And so I'm excited. I think the sponsors are excited. We got a really good group. I always call it the fun part of the job. It really is. And so if we can continue to roll those programs out, I think we got almost all of them going, which is phenomenal, in a pandemic. If we can keep that going, then, we limit the students that come up here and talk about the negative parts of COVID and self-isolation and stuff like that. So.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any questions from the board?
I just was wondering, I know that music my sons were involved in it early on. It has competitions. Is there any guidance from the state yet on that kind of thing?
Regarding ILMEA is one of our big state music organizations. They've met, I think, 3 times, I could be wrong in that, 3 big times throughout the summer to try to change what our fall ILMEA auditions look like. All state, that's the same governing organization. We have not received an additional update if those things will be happening in the fall. I think they might be. I'm not a part of that committee. They might be kind of treading lightly to see what the fall entails, and I know maybe looking at an alternative schedule and running some of those things in hopefully in the spring. I'm kind of talking off the cuff about that. That is not a directive from ILMEA. I'm not an ILMEA
So is your concern that you want to, if there's a possibility to have them?
Oh, I was just
asking?
I'm just asking, and I think again, just hammering home the point of like the state doesn't know what the hell it's doing.
Right. Well, they're taking it slow, and I think to see how school openings are rolling out, it's just, we don't have any guidance from our ILMA organization about that. Nothing's been brought out yet. I do know that ACDA, which is another, one of our other choral organizations, and RB students have participated in ACDA last year, and so some students auditioned for the honor choirs the year before. I actually host a statewide festival for the treble ensemble at COD. That has been, we're putting a pin in that and that's probably not happening this year. And they just announced that there will be no honor choirs at the ACDA national level in March. That was to be in Texas. It will be a virtual conference for educators.
There is some like on FCCLA, which isn't associated with the IHSA. They have like a phenomenal protocol list of how they're going to do competitions virtually this year. And the FCCLA is more of the cooking, fashion, stuff like that. So they are going to run their programs to talk to Aaron with Model UN. They also have some protocols in place. So I'm excited to see those run. We're still waiting, like you said, on the IHSA with the extracurricular side of things.
And I think Speech has a virtual platform ready for theirs as well. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to second what Kevin said, Aubrey. You did a great job at explaining. We asked everybody to explain how they would do it on an e-learning platform or a remote platform. You really went above and beyond it, and you could tell you really cared a lot.
I do. I very much care about your children and their music education and theater experiences and all their experiences.
It just really showed. And that we didn't get that from everybody. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you, David.
Thanks.
I don't think there's any other items, Mr. Smith.
No,
We did
district calendar, we don't need to discuss that because we're going to go to the number B. Matters for close, we already had closed. So any visitor statements? Anybody want to speak? We still have one more. Okay, I promised two. Discussion items, any requested discussion items?
Future agenda item was Mrs. Zalis and Kristen about the fees related to activities and athletics.
Okay. And then we'll.
I make a motion, we adjourn for this evening. Oh, wait, he's got to read the statement, Brian, so you can sit there, but you got to listen to it.
Come on, sit down. The Board of Education, they make me read this. You should have seen the one I had to read when I first began. I made it a lot shorter. Welcomes and encourages the participation of its citizens in the business school district. There are 2 points in the meeting, this being the second, where visitor statements are scheduled. Citizens are welcome to raise questions and make comments at either one. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Individual cannot be combined. Please note, Board of Education will not answer questions or engage in dialogue during visitor comments. If a person would like additional time, can address the board. Such request shall be submitted in writing 48 hours before the meeting. Thanks. Let's get your name.
Brian Conroy. I have a sophomore and a senior here. The only comment I want to make is that I understand that the Plan B that you're considering tonight is the safe option, but the thing I just want to express is it's definitely not the healthy option. And you know, the social and emotional toll that this is taking on our kids can't be measured by a thermometer or a test administered in a Walmart parking lot. To give up a full quarter, that's 6% of the kids' high school experience. You know, the seniors will never be able to get that back. So I would just implore the board, and I know you guys are on board with this, to keep pushing towards a compromise with the teachers to get the kids back here to some degree in school together. Maybe that means, I don't know, maybe the teachers, if they want to stay home, they can teach the class remotely, but the kids are in class. and to keep pushing with that hybrid model to some extent to get these kids in here so they could experience some of that high school experience that they'll never get back. That because if we give up a full quarter because of what's happening, I mean, in a quarter, there's not going to be a resolution. There's not going to be a vaccine. There's not going to be a solution. So basically, by giving up a quarter, we're giving up the year. So the seniors this year would have given up half of their junior year and senior year, and then we're sending them off to college, in my mind, stunted socially and emotionally, and sending them off to college to, I just think we need to continue to work together to find a hybrid solution and get these kids back to school to some degree at some point. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. All right.
Motion to adjourn?
What do
I
you
make a
wanna-
motion that we adjourn the August 19th, 2020 school board meeting for high school Township District 208, Township High School District 208.
Second.
Second, Ms. Sierra.
Take a vote.
That's being all in favor, correct, Marion?
Oh,
Aye.
all in favor. I like those better.
Aye.
Aye.
Tom, we're done.
All opposed?
We're hanging up on you,
Opposed,
Tom.
no.
I'm voting aye too.
Okay, good.
Have a good night.
He said aye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everybody.